Hi everybody, this is Laura, City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today we are celebrating the 5-year anniversary of Stretch the Sketch. If you're not familiar with Stretch the Sketch, it's a hop in which we take a sketch that's intended for a 12 by 12 inch layout and we either stretch it to a larger format or we shrink it to a smaller format. For today's Stretch the Sketch, we're doing something a little bit different. Because it's the 5-year anniversary, instead of using a sketch, we are scrap lifting one of Janet Fritz of Galaxy Girl Creations layouts. Stretch the Sketch is one of the many things that Janet does in the scrapbooking community. I love an opportunity to scrap lift Janet. She has so many beautiful layouts. It was a little hard to choose one, but I eventually settled on the one that you could see in the upper left-hand corner. In addition to scrap lifting one of Janet's layouts, we're also incorporating some type of wood in our pages. The page that I'm making today is 6¼ inches by 8½ inches. All of the layouts that I make in this size are for an album that I started making in response to a class that I took with Janet. It was called Impactful Storytelling, and it was my first exposure to the idea of telling my own story, not just the story of my daughters and my family. And I'm getting excited about finishing up this project because after today's layout, I only have 2 more layouts to complete. For this layout, I am using a really old My Mind's Eye collection called Collectable. And then I don't know if you used to use those collections, but they would have like sub-collections within their larger collections. This little sub-collection is called Remarkable. I've been using these papers a lot on my smaller pages, and I really like them. Because my layout is so much smaller than Janet's, I couldn't put the large cluster off to the right the way she did. I made everything centered on the layout. It looks like Janet used washi tape for the vertical strips. I used some scraps of paper that were already cut. I like the way those scraps of paper were 3 different colors and 3 different widths as well. I inked the edges of all of those papers with some Distress ink in Vintage Photo. I like the way Janet had her washi tape ripped at different angles, so I tried to mirror that on my own layout. As I'm trimming the strips, I'm trying to make sure that each of the strips ends at a different spot. I think that that adds a little bit more interest to the cluster than if they ended at the same spot. I used the Canon Selfie to print out these 2 pictures. I then cut them down. They measure 2¼ inches by 3 5/8 inches. I mounted them on some white cardstock and then again on some of the pattern papers in the collection. I'm going to make a mixed media background, so I'm using a pencil and I'm just indicating on the background about where the cluster is going to be. I'm trying to be very careful not to get the pencil in an area where it will be seen. I'm using my favorite paper. This is 120-pound smooth white cardstock, and I've coated it with a layer of gesso. I'm using some Shimmerz paint Vibez, Here Comes the Sun, to add a little bit of color to the background. I don't want to add too many different colors because it's such a small layout, so I'm just going to stick with the yellow. This Shimmerz paint color is very intense. It's great because you could add a lot of different shades just by using the one spray. So I started off by watering it down quite a bit, and then as I built up the color, I watered it down less and less so that you would see different variations of that same color, different intensities. It almost looks like different colors. I dry the color between each application, and I also keep trying that cluster on top of the color just to make sure I have it in the right area. Now I'm adding some splatters. I like the splatters to go past the larger area of color onto the background just a little bit. You can see I'm mainly putting them around the outside of that large area of yellow, mainly because most of the rest of it is going to be covered up. I added a little bit more color in the upper left-hand corner, and I'm using bubble wrap, but I'm using so much water that the impression that bubble wrap sometimes makes on the background isn't there. If you use less water, make the paint a little bit more dry, the bubble wrap texture will be more visible. Now I'm adding another round of splatters. The last time I rolled a paper towel on top. This time I'm going to just let them dry. And I think that, again, that helps to make the splatters look like different colors. And it adds some depth to the background. I use my heat tool to set the color to dry it up, and then I roll paper towel on top just to get any little bits of color that haven't dried yet absorbed. I wanted to add some modeling paste, so I'm using this stencil. This was given to me by my friend Michelle, and I love it. It's just a whole bunch of little dots. I don't know the manufacturer. Because the dots that this stencil creates with the modeling paste are so small, I was thinking that I wanted to put a lot of texture on this background. So I put down one round of the modeling paste, and then I go back and I add another one on top. So this layout was made in response to one of the prompts in Janet's class, Impactful Storytelling, and it was about being grateful. The reason that I picked the photos I did is because something that I really, really value and I'm so grateful for, especially as time goes on and my girls get to be older. They're grown women at this point, although it's kind of funny to hear myself say that, but they are. I am very, very grateful for any time the whole family can spend together. These photos were of a shopping trip we went on. I was so glad that both Danielle and Julia were available. We went to TJ Maxx, we went to Macy's, and a few other places. And so I just snapped a couple of pictures. I just had a really, really nice day with them. And I want to remember how grateful that I am that I have two kids and a husband that I enjoy spending time with. And that's what I wrote about in the journaling to go along with this page. When I finally finish this album, I will do a flip through so that you could see how everything came together. I added some watered down white acrylic paint splatters to the background. I added quite a few, and then I put that aside and let it thoroughly dry. Once the background was dry, I put it through the laminator so it would be flat, and now I'm attaching that large cluster down to the background. I realized when I was putting adhesive on the back that it looked a little crooked in some places, so I straightened that out before attaching it down. I don't have the same space to add lots of embellishments the way Janet did on her layout, but I did want to add a couple. I decided to put a circular element the same way Janet has on her layout in the upper right-hand side of the cluster, and then I'm going to put another one in the lower left-hand side. I found one embellishment that was circular. I'm not sure if there's a name to it. It has little points like a sun. You could see it on the right-hand side of the layout. I wanted to have another one, but I didn't have another one left. I had used up all of those embellishments, and there were a lot of them at one time, it seems. So I took a punch that I had. I found that in Tuesday Morning years ago. It was so, so cheap, and I knew I would someday use it for something. So it had more of a sun kind of ray shape to it, and I cut each of those rays into points, just on the points that I knew would show, and I attached that down to the lower left-hand side of the cluster. I wanted to mirror the other embellishment that has a circle of a different pattern paper in the center, so I punched out a 1-inch yellow pattern paper. Once I placed it down, though, I didn't like it, so then I decided to look through my black and white scraps, and I had, unbelievably, a scrap of pattern paper. This is a Pebbles paper. It's a Christmas themed, but it has music notes the same way that the one on the upper right-hand corner does, so I thought that was perfect. I punched out a circle into the edges and attached it down. You can see that I'm using wood for the title. I picked those out before I even started the layout. I was so glad to find a little wood piece that said grateful. I also found one that said family time. And then in with the My Mind's Eye collection were little tiny yellow stickers. I found one that said for. And I kept moving that around. I couldn't figure out exactly where I wanted it, and eventually it fell off and I couldn't find it. But I was so lucky there was a second one, so I was able to replace it with the new one. There were coordinating brads for this collection, so I thought I would put brads in the centers of both of those circular embellishments. And then I was thinking I could also add some brads to that long red center strip. These are the brads that go all the way through the page, so I just used the end of a pointy pair of scissors to pierce the page. I had a little mishap with two of the brads. Later on in the process, I decided to put a piece of pattern paper behind the whole layout. So I took all the brads off because the paper wouldn't sit nicely on the back of the layout if the brads were still in there. So I put them to the side, and when I went to put them back on, I could not find two of the brads anywhere. I put two different brads on because I thought I'm just going to go with the flow. It's okay. But then finally, my husband found them in my scrapbook room garbage. That was so nice of him to look for them there. I guess he knows me. And I was able to put these brads back in place. I wanted to add a few photo corners. I'm just going to add 3, 2 on the photo on the right and 1 on the photo on the left, just to add a little bit of embellishment to the photos, but they're such small photos, I didn't want to go crazy adding big photo corners to all 4 corners. I ink the edges of those, and then I attach them down to the layout. So I wanted to mention that I've been doing Stretch the Sketch since December of 2020. This was the very first hop I ever did. I was so excited when Janet invited me to take part in Stretch the Sketch. I remember that I absolutely rushed to get a layout together because I wanted to be in the Stretch the Sketch hop for that month, and I am still so grateful to be a part of this hop. I think it's a great concept, and I absolutely love being part of it. So I put some enamel dots on those 3 photo corners. I was lucky to find a yellow that matched the photo corners, and this is where I take out the brads. Off camera, I trimmed the layout down slightly on all 4 sides, and now I'm adding lots of ATG adhesive and attaching the layout down and just giving it a little red border all around. It's a very thin border. I trimmed the top a tiny bit, and that is the very last touch to the layout. Here are just a couple of close-ups. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed watching it, and I'm grateful for everyone who watches my videos as well. Please check out all the Stretch the Sketch videos for this month. The links are in the description box. Happy 5th anniversary to the Stretch the Sketch hop. I hope that everybody has a fantastic day, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.